The mountain air was razor sharp the next morning, cold enough to bite through gloves. A thin mist clung to the treetops, curling like smoke over the ridgelines. The kind of weather that swallowed sound and made the forest feel endless. Agent Hale stood at the edge of the clearing where the cabin had been searched the night before. A row of tactical officers waited for his signal. They all knew, somewhere out there, Alayna Martin was either alive, or they were running out of time to find her. At 6:03 a.m., the first teams moved out, fanning across the steep terrain. Each was paired with a K9 unit, the dogs straining against their leashes, noses to the ground. Sheriff Rourke stayed close to Hale and Tran, his shotgun slung over one shoulder. "This Danner's smart," he said quietly. "He's not just hiding, he's moving." Tran glanced at the uneven tracks in the dirt. "And he's dragging her with him." By mid-morning, a breakthrough, one of the K9s picked up a strong scent trail near a rocky outcrop. Tran and Hale scrambled up the slope, following the dog until they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a ravine. There, half hidden under a cluster of pine needles, was a scrap of pink fabric, torn and frayed. Tran recognized it instantly. The same material as Alayna's sneaker. "She's close," Tran whispered. But the forest was fighting them. The trail zigzagged between gullies, doubled back on itself, and vanished into shallow streams that washed away scent. By noon, they had nothing but silence and the slow, steady thud of their own heartbeats. Then the radio crackled, possible movement, northwest quadrant, near the old mining road. Hale's eyes locked on Tran's. "That's less than a mile from here." They moved fast, boots thudding on packed dirt, branches whipping past their faces. The air grew damp and cold as they descended toward the road. And then, from somewhere ahead, came a faint, desperate sound. It wasn't the forest. It wasn't an animal. It was a girl's voice. Crying. The crying grew louder as they crept down the narrow trail. Tran raised her fist, signaling the team to slow their approach. The forest seemed to hold its breath. They edged forward until the trees opened into a small clearing beside the old mining road. And there, kneeling in the dirt, her wrists bound in front of her, was Alayna Martin. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears. She was trembling, whispering something over and over. "Please. Please." Hale's voice was steady but low. "Alayna. My name is Agent Hale. We're here to take you home." She shook her head violently, eyes darting past him. Tran caught the movement, and turned. From the tree line stepped a man in a dark jacket and ball cap. Broad shoulders. Snake tattoo curling up his neck. He had a pistol in his right hand and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said, his voice smooth and cold, "looks like I've got company." Hale kept his own weapon low, his gaze locked on Danner. "Let her go. We can talk about the rest." Danner laughed once, short and sharp. "You think you've got the ground here? You're in my woods, fed." Tran shifted slightly to flank him, her boot barely crunching the leaves. Danner's eyes flicked toward her, and that was enough for Rourke to step forward, shotgun leveled. "Drop it, Danner." For a moment, no one moved. The mist swirled between them, the forest pressing in like a silent audience. Then Danner's smirk faded. "She's worth more than you think," he said quietly. "More than any of you know." Hale's pulse pounded in his ears. What does that mean? But Danner didn't answer. Instead, he shifted his grip on the pistol, not toward the agents, but toward Alayna. The moment broke like glass. Tran lunged forward, shouting, "Gun!" Rourke fired, the blast echoing through the trees. Danner staggered back, his pistol flying into the dirt. He hit the ground hard, clutching his side, and the team swarmed him before he could move again. Hale dropped to his knees beside Alayna, cutting the zip ties from her wrists. "You're safe now," he said, voice rough. "It's over." But even as she collapsed into his arms, Alayna whispered something that made his blood run cold. "No. It's not." They moved Alayna to the safety of the command post's med tent, a portable heater buzzing softly in the corner. A paramedic wrapped her in a thermal blanket and checked her vitals. Physically, she was bruised, dehydrated, and exhausted, but alive. Hale crouched beside her. You're safe now. He can't hurt you. Alayna's eyes darted to the tent flap, where 2 deputies stood guard over a cuffed and bleeding Danner. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He wasn't the one I was scared of. Hale frowned. What do you mean? She gripped his sleeve. They said my dad had something. Something they needed. And if he didn't give it to them, they'd make me disappear. Hale glanced toward Sheriff Rourke, who was already looking at him like he'd been hit with the same thought. What kind of something? Hale pressed. A box, she said. In the garage. Gary told Danner it was worth more than 100 of me. That's why they took me, so my dad would give it up. Rourke straightened. Clark never mentioned a box. Hale stood, his mind spinning. If Clark Martin had something valuable enough to order a kidnapping, then either he was hiding something, or he was in far more danger than they'd realized. He crossed the tent to Tran. We need eyes on that house now. If this box is real, we can't risk it disappearing. While Tran organized the search, Rourke stepped into the holding area where Danner sat, cuffed to a chair. You picked the wrong girl, Rourke said flatly. Danner's lip curled. Did I? You don't even know what you just stepped into, Sheriff. Enlighten me. But Danner just leaned back, the faintest trace of a smile creeping across his face. You'll find out. Sooner than you think. That night, Hale, Tran, and Rourke drove to the Martins' home. Clark opened the door looking pale and drawn, but when Hale told him about the box, he froze. In the garage, hidden behind stacks of paint cans and old tools, they found a heavy steel case no bigger than a briefcase. It was locked with a combination dial. Clark's hands trembled as he turned it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were dozens of crisp, uncirculated $100 bills, and beneath them, a thin folder stamped with a faded government seal. Hale flipped it open. What he saw made his stomach knot. The first page was brittle with age, the paper yellowed around the edges. Typed across the top in block letters, property of the United States Department of Defense. Beneath that was a list of names, most of them blacked out with thick, uneven strokes of redacted ink. But one name stood out, printed clearly near the bottom. Victor Danner. Hale flipped through the pages. They were reports, each stamped classified, detailing covert operations from nearly 20 years ago. Some involved the recovery of sensitive materials from overseas. Others hinted at the disposal of assets considered security risks. The last report was different. No redactions. It was a witness statement, from Clark Martin. Hale looked up slowly. You worked for them. Clark's face was pale. I wasn't supposed to keep it. But when the operation ended, people started disappearing. My CO, the other witnesses. One by one. I thought if I had the folder, I'd have insurance. And Danner? Hale pressed. Clark's voice dropped. He was one of ours. But when the op went south, he cut ties, started working for people who'd pay him to keep quiet. Or to keep others quiet. Tran let out a sharp breath. This wasn't about money. It was about silencing you. Clark nodded. They knew the only way to get me to open that case was to go after my family. Rourke's jaw tightened. So you were just going to sit on this forever? Hope they forgot you existed? I didn't think they'd still be watching, Clark said. But when Gary started asking about the garage, I knew. Hale closed the folder and slid it into an evidence bag. This changes everything. If these files are real, Danner's not just a hired thug, he's part of a cleanup job that's still running. Tran met his eyes. And we've just kicked the hornet's nest. Back at the command post, Danner refused to speak further without a lawyer. But the smirk he wore as they led him to a holding cell told Hale one thing: this wasn't over. The folder had opened a door, and on the other side was a secret someone was still willing to kill to protect. By the next morning, the folder was locked inside a reinforced evidence safe at the FBI's regional office. 2 agents were assigned to guard it around the clock. But Hale didn't feel reassured, not when he knew how many powerful people might want it gone. In the conference room, Tran flipped through high-resolution scans of the documents. Look at this, she said, pointing to a page buried halfway through the stack. The typed report listed the location of an unregistered site, a place in the mountains used for off-the-books detentions. Next to the coordinates was a date, 3 weeks ago. Hale's jaw tightened. 3 weeks ago. That's recent. Danner might not have been the only one using that place. In the holding cell downstairs, Danner sat slouched against the wall, one arm bandaged from Rourke's shotgun blast. When Hale stepped inside, Danner didn't bother looking up. "You're done," Hale told him. "We have your SUV, your prints, your link to the cabin, and now we've got the folder." Danner chuckled, low and humorless. "That folder? You think it's complete?" He lifted his head, meeting Hale's eyes. "They didn't give you everything. They never do." Before Hale could press him, the door opened and an assistant U.S. attorney entered with a file. She leaned in close, speaking quietly, "You're not going to like this. Orders from above, Danner's being transferred to federal custody. Effective immediately." Hale stared at her. On whose authority? But she was already gone, leaving only the echo of her heels in the hallway. By mid-afternoon, a black transport van rolled out of the sheriff's lot, Danner inside, flanked by men Hale didn't recognize. He watched it disappear down the highway, his gut twisting. The paperwork said Danner was headed to a secure facility. But paperwork could be forged. Tran stepped up beside him. "We just lost our best lead." Hale glanced back toward the evidence safe. "Then the folder's all we have left. For now." The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Sunlight filtered in through thin curtains, painting pale stripes across the bed. Alayna sat propped against a stack of pillows, a thick blanket tucked under her chin. Her mother, Elise, held her hand tightly, as if letting go might make her vanish again. Hale and Tran stood at the foot of the bed, careful not to overwhelm her. "You did everything right," Tran said softly. "You stayed calm. You gave us what we needed to find you." Alayna looked down at her hands. They weren't always together. Gary wasn't with Danner at first. There was another man. Hale straightened. "What other man?" Alayna frowned, eyes flicking back and forth as if she were replaying the memory. "He had a scar on his cheek. And a patch on his jacket, like an army patch, but not. I think it had a red bird on it." Tran shot Hale a glance. A red bird wasn't much, but it was something. "Did you hear them call him by a name?" Hale asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "They called him Finch." Denise's fingers tightened around her daughter's. "You don't have to think about this anymore, sweetheart." But Alayna's gaze stayed fixed on Hale. Finch said. "He said I wasn't the one they really wanted." The word sent a chill through the room. "What did he mean by that?" Hale pressed. Alayna's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said there was another one." Outside in the hallway, Tran leaned against the wall. "That's it, isn't it? There's another target. Maybe already taken." Hale didn't answer right away. He was already pulling up the map from the folder, eyes scanning for anything near the coordinates of the unregistered site. If Finch was still out there, and they had another victim, then Alayna's rescue was only the beginning. Night had fallen by the time Hale and Tran left the hospital. The parking lot lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows over the wet pavement. Tran closed her car door and looked across the roof at Hale. "We tell Rourke about Finch?" Hale shook his head. "Not yet. We don't even know how high this goes." Back at the command post, the evidence safe loomed in the corner, the folder still inside. Hale ran his hand over the cold steel. Every instinct told him that as long as it stayed there, someone would be coming for it. A deputy stepped into the room, holding a sealed envelope. "This just came for you. No return address." Hale slid it open. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white. It showed a chained metal door and what looked like a concrete bunker. On the back, written in neat block letters, was a single word, Finch. 2 states away, a man in a faded army jacket stood in a dimly lit warehouse. The red bird patch on his shoulder was frayed with age. Before him, a small figure sat tied to a chair, head bowed. Finch knelt, speaking in a low, almost gentle voice. "They'll come for you," he said. "And when they do, we'll be ready." At sunrise the next day, Hale stood with Tran at the edge of the unregistered site marked in the folder. They had no warrant, no backup, just a gut feeling and a trail of ghosts. Tran glanced at him. "This isn't over, is it?" Hale shook his head slowly. "Not even close." The wind carried the scent of pine and rain. Somewhere in the distance, a lone bird cried out sharp and piercing. The hunt for Finch had begun. At Crime Chronicles, every crime leaves a trace and we follow it. For more true crime stories, subscribe to our channel at Crime Chronicles 365.